My name is Ella Carter. I'm 31 years old from Denver, Colorado. The laughter was sharp enough to cut glass. Ella, go find another table. This one's for family. My sister Megan said it loud enough for every stranger in that luxury restaurant to hear. Her husband chuckled. My parents looked down. Even the waiter hesitated, holding a tray mid-air. Then the bill arrived, $3,400, placed neatly in front of me. I didn't argue. I smiled, took a sip of my wine, and signed the receipt. That night, I didn't pay for dinner. I paid for a lesson, one they'd never forget. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you are watching from. The restaurant was called Lavish, and it sat on top of the city like a glass crown. From our private room on the 54th floor, the lights of Denver spread out below us, a carpet of shimmering diamonds. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, dripping crystals that threw rainbows across the white tablecloths. The air smelled of expensive perfume, seared scallops, and the faint, clean scent of money. I had booked this room, this specific view, because I wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted this night to be the one that changed things. It was my celebration. After 9 long years at a competitive marketing firm, I had finally been promoted to senior director. It was a huge step. The title came with a corner office, a team of 20 people, and a salary that had tripled overnight. For the first time in my life, I felt truly successful, like I had built something that was entirely my own. And the first thing I wanted to do was share it with my family. I wanted to treat them, to see pride in their eyes. I wanted, just for one night, to feel like I was enough. Megan, my older sister, had insisted on Lavish. When I'd called to tell her my news, her response was lukewarm. "Oh, that's great, Ella," she'd said, her voice distracted. I could hear her typing in the background. "We should go out to celebrate." When I offered to take them anywhere they wanted, she immediately suggested the most expensive place in the city. "If you're making the big bucks now, you should act like it," she'd laughed. It felt less like a celebration for me and more like an opportunity for her, but I ignored the feeling. I wanted to be generous, so here we were. My mother, Catherine, sat to my left, picking at her sea bass and offering small, nervous smiles. My father, David, sat opposite, swirling a glass of red wine that cost more than my first car payment. He hadn't said more than 10 words to me all evening. Then there was Megan, glowing in a silk dress, and her husband, Tyler, a man whose smile never quite reached his eyes. He ran a construction company and carried himself with the unearned confidence of someone who had never faced a real consequence. For the first hour, things were almost pleasant. We talked about safe topics, the weather, a new show on television. Tyler bragged about a new city contract his company had landed. "Just another 7-figure deal," he said, waving his fork dismissively. "The city loves us," Megan beamed at him. "My husband is a genius." I tried to steer the conversation back. "The new role is challenging," I said, hoping someone would ask about it. "I'm heading up the new digital expansion campaign. It's a lot of pressure, but it's exciting." My mother patted my hand. "That's nice, dear. Just don't work too hard," my father grunted in agreement. "No point in burning yourself out." And that was it. The subject was closed. No one asked what the campaign was. No one asked how I felt. My biggest professional achievement was reduced to a passing comment, a thing to be cautioned against. I felt a familiar pang in my chest, the dull ache of being invisible. I took a slow sip of my wine and tried to smile. The waiter, a kind man with tired eyes named Charles, was impeccable. He refilled our glasses without being asked and described the dessert menu with genuine passion. I ordered the chocolate lava cake. Megan ordered the creme brulee. As we waited for dessert, Megan clinked her fork against her champagne flute. The sharp, clear sound silenced the table. A smirk played on her lips. It was the same smirk she'd had in high school, right before she'd tell a lie or reveal a secret that wasn't hers to share. "A toast," she announced, her voice carrying across the room. She raised her glass and everyone at the table followed suit, including me. I thought maybe this is it. Maybe this is the moment she finally says something kind. "To Ella," she began, and my heart gave a hopeful flutter. "Our family's little overachiever." Her eyes scanned my face and the smirk widened. "You've come so far? For an adopted kid." The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. The quiet hum of the restaurant seemed to vanish. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. Adopted, she said it like a slur. It wasn't a secret, but it was a fact my family treated like a delicate, shameful piece of china. Never to be touched, never to be mentioned. It was the button they pressed when they wanted to remind me that I was different, that I didn't truly belong. My father stared intently into his wine glass. My mother's smile faltered and she looked at the tablecloth as if it held the secrets of the universe. Tyler chuckled, a low, ugly sound. He reached over and squeezed Megan's hand, as if congratulating her on a perfect shot. I felt the eyes of the other diners on us. A woman at a nearby table looked away quickly, her face flushed with secondhand embarrassment. I felt naked, exposed under the glittering chandeliers. Megan wasn't finished. She lowered her glass, her voice dropping to a tone of sweet, false concern. "It's just so wonderful that you're doing so well for yourself. But this table," she gestured around at our parents, at her husband. "This is for family. Real family." She looked directly at me, her eyes cold and clear. "Ella, go find another table. This one's for family." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a crushing weight. In that moment, I felt every single instance of being second best, of being an outsider in my own home, coalesce into a single point of unbearable pain. I waited for someone to speak, for my mother to say, "Megan, that's a horrible thing to say," for my father to demand she apologize, but they said nothing. Their silence was their answer. It was their agreement. In their eyes, Megan was right. My vision cleared. The pain didn't disappear, but it crystallized into something hard and cold. It became clarity. I looked at their faces, my sister's smug triumph, my brother-in-law's amusement, my parents' cowardly avoidance. I saw them for exactly who they were. Not family, but a collection of people I had spent a lifetime trying to please, with nothing to show for it but a deep, hollow wound. Charles, the waiter, arrived with the dessert tray. He froze a few feet from our table, sensing the toxic atmosphere. His eyes darted between me and Megan, and he looked profoundly uncomfortable. He was a stranger, and he showed more empathy than anyone at my table. He set the desserts down with trembling hands, and then produced the bill, holding it uncertainly. Tyler waved a dismissive hand. "Give it to Ella. It's her big night." Charles's eyes met mine, and I saw a flicker of pity in them. He walked over and placed the leather-bound bill folder gently in front of me. I opened it. The total was $3,112.58, an obscene amount of money for a meal that had tasted like ash. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. The time for that was over. I reached into my purse, pulled out my new corporate credit card, the one that came with my promotion, and placed it in the folder. "Thank you, Charles," I said, my voice even and calm. It didn't even sound like my own. "The service was wonderful." I looked at Megan, at my parents. A slow, genuine smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just been set free. I took a final sip of my wine, the expensive red now tasting like victory. When Charles returned, I signed the receipt. On the tip line, I wrote in $600. I wanted him to have a good night even if I hadn't. I gathered my purse and stood up. My chair made a soft scraping sound on the polished floor. "Thank you all for coming," I said, the words feeling formal and distant. "Enjoy your dessert." I walked away without looking back. I walked past the other diners, past the bar, and into the glass elevator. As it descended, I watched the city lights rise up to meet me. I wasn't falling. I was flying. That night, I hadn't just paid for a meal. I had paid for my exit fee. I had paid for the lesson. And I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that the bill I had just settled was nothing compared to the one they were about to receive. I grew up in a quiet two-story house on a street lined with maple trees. From the outside, it was perfect. A green lawn, a white picket fence, a tire swing hanging from the oldest oak. People saw our family and saw a portrait of American happiness. But inside, our home operated on a silent, unwritten set of rules. And the first rule was, Megan comes first. Megan was the firstborn, the biological child, the one who looked like our mother. She had our mom's blonde hair and our dad's blue eyes. I was adopted at 6 months old. I had dark brown hair and green eyes that didn't match anyone. In every family photo, I was the one who looked like a visitor. From the very beginning, I was defined not by who I was, but by what I was not. I was not theirs. Favoritism wasn't loud or aggressive in our house. It was quiet, like a slow poison. It was in the small things, the everyday choices that told you where you stood. When we were kids, Megan would get the last cookie without asking. If we both wanted to watch different shows on TV, the channel was always changed to her choice. My parents called it keeping the peace. What they meant was keeping Megan happy. My peace didn't matter. I learned early on that my value was tied to my usefulness. I was the responsible one, the quiet one. I was the one who remembered to take the trash out, who did her homework without being told, who never caused any trouble. I became an expert at being easy. I thought if I asked for nothing and gave everything, I would eventually earn the love they gave Megan so freely. I remember one afternoon in 4th grade, I came home clutching a certificate. I had made the honor roll for the first time. My chest was puffed up with pride. I had studied for weeks, acing my math and science tests. I ran into the kitchen where my mom was on the phone. I waited patiently, practically vibrating with excitement. When she hung up, I held out the certificate. "Mom, look, I made the honor roll." She took it and glanced at it, her eyes scanning the words without really seeing them. "Oh, that's nice, Ella," she said, her voice flat. She placed the certificate on the kitchen counter, next to a pile of mail. Then her face lit up with real excitement. "But did you see Megan's new haircut? She went to that new salon downtown. It's so chic." For the rest of the evening, all she talked about was Megan's hair. My honor roll certificate was forgotten on the counter, eventually getting a coffee ring on it before it was thrown away with the junk mail. I felt a familiar hollowness spread through me. I had worked so hard and it didn't even register. Megan had gotten a haircut, and it was the event of the week. That day, I learned that my achievements would always be nice, while Megan's existence was celebrated. The pattern only got worse as we got older. When Megan was 17, she was a wild child. She snuck out, went to parties, and dated boys our parents hated. I was the one who covered for her, who lied to our parents about where she was. I was her alibi, her secret keeper. I thought it was what a good sister did. I thought it was a form of love. One night the phone rang at 2 a.m. It was Megan, crying and hysterical. She had taken our dad's new sedan without permission and crashed it into a mailbox a few towns over. She'd been drinking. "You have to help me, Ella," she sobbed. "If Dad finds out I was drinking, he'll kill me." I was 16. I didn't even have my full license yet, but I put on my coat, snuck out of the house, and took a taxi to where she was. The front of the car was completely smashed in. I paid the taxi with the babysitting money I'd been saving for months. I told Megan to go home and get in bed. I told her I would handle it. I stayed with the car until the tow truck came. I was the one who talked to the police, telling them a deer had run out in front of me. They believed me because I was a good kid. I was the quiet achiever who never lied. The insurance deductible was $1,000. My parents were furious about the car, but they were relieved it was just a silly accident. I took the blame, and I used my entire savings account to pay the deductible. Megan never said thank you. She never paid me back. A week later, my parents grounded me for a month for being irresponsible. Megan was allowed to go to the spring formal. When I tried to argue, my dad said, "Ella, you need to learn to be more careful. Megan looks up to you." They didn't see the injustice. They didn't see that I had sacrificed for her. They only saw what they wanted to see. Their perfect daughter, Megan, and their responsible but flawed daughter, Ella. Love in our house wasn't unconditional. It was a transaction. I paid with my silence, with my obedience, with my money, with my achievements. I kept paying, year after year, hoping that one day the debt would be settled and I would be seen. I gave them my loyalty, my protection, my support. In return, they gave me a seat at the table, but they never ever made me feel like I was part of the family. I was just the guest who paid her way. And that night at L'Arche, when Megan told me to find another table, it wasn't a new wound. It was just the final, deepest cut in a lifetime of 1,000 smaller ones. It was the moment I finally realized I was done paying. The promotion felt like the first day of sun after a long winter. For years, I had kept my head down at work. I came in early, stayed late, and took on the projects no one else wanted. I poured all the energy I didn't spend on my family into my career. My job was the one place where my effort was rewarded, where my achievements were measured and acknowledged. It was the one place where I felt seen. When my boss, a stern but fair woman named Ms. Albright, called me into her office, I thought I was in trouble. But she motioned for me to sit down, a rare smile on her face. She told me the board had unanimously approved my promotion to senior director. She talked about my dedication, my innovative ideas, my leadership potential. Every word she said was like a balm on a wound I didn't even know was still bleeding. I walked out of her office in a daze, clutching the offer letter like a winning lottery ticket. My first instinct was to call my mom. The little girl in me, the one still holding the honor roll certificate, wanted to hear her say, "I'm proud of you." I dialed her number, my heart thumping with a familiar, foolish hope. "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have some amazing news." I told her about the promotion, the new title, the salary. I waited, holding my breath. "Oh, Ella, that's wonderful," she said. Her tone was the same one she used when I told her I'd found a good deal on paper towels. Pleasant but distant. "That's a lot of responsibility. Make sure you're taking your vitamins. You can't afford to get sick, that was it." No questions about the new role. No celebration in her voice. Just a detached piece of motherly advice. The hope deflated, leaving the usual ache in its place. But this time, something else was there too. A stubborn refusal to be dismissed. I want to take everyone out to dinner to celebrate, I said, my voice firmer than I expected. A really nice dinner. My treat. This, she understood. What a lovely idea. Megan and Tyler will be so thrilled. I'll let her know. Before I could even suggest a place, she passed the phone to my sister. Megan's voice crackled with an energy my mother's had lacked. A celebration dinner? How fun. I know the perfect place. It's called L'Arche. It's impossible to get into, but for a senior director, you can probably pull some strings. I knew the restaurant. It was famous. It was also famously expensive. A part of me wanted to say no, to suggest the quiet Italian place I actually loved, but I knew what would happen. Megan would pout. My mom would call me cheap. The celebration would be tainted before it even began. Okay, I said, the word costing me more than just a reservation. L'Arche it is. Book a private room, Ella, Megan added, as if it were an afterthought. We don't want to be surrounded by tourists. I spent the next hour on the phone, securing the reservation. The only private room available required a prepaid deposit of $500. I put it on my credit card without hesitation. I told myself it was worth it. I was proving something. I was showing them that the quiet, adopted girl had made something of herself. I was buying their respect. The week leading up to the dinner was filled with anxiety. I bought a new dress, a sophisticated navy blue sheath that made me feel powerful and professional. I got my hair done. I rehearsed conversations in my head, imagining myself confidently explaining my new role, making them laugh, feeling the warmth of their approval. I was staging a play in my mind, a fantasy where I was finally the star of the show. The night of the dinner, as I stood in front of my mirror, I felt a knot of dread in my stomach. I looked the part of a successful woman, but I felt like a little kid about to show her parents a drawing, terrified they would just smile politely and stick it on the fridge without a second glance. I pushed the feeling down. Tonight would be different, I told myself. It had to be. The moment I walked into the restaurant and saw them already seated, my fantasy began to crumble. They were laughing at something Tyler had said. They didn't even see me approach. I had to clear my throat to get their attention. Ella! There you are, my mother said, as if I were late, even though I was 5 minutes early. The dinner unfolded just as I described. The polite but shallow conversation, the dismissal of my career, the way they treated me less like the host and more like the wallet. And then came the toast. Megan's cruel words, my parents' silent complicity. It wasn't just a dinner. It was a trial, and I had been found guilty of not belonging. After I paid the bill and walked out, I didn't go straight home. I drove up to Lookout Mountain and parked at an overlook. The city lights of Denver sparkled below, the same lights I had just seen from the restaurant window. From L'Arche, they had looked like a promise. Now they looked cold and distant. The shock had worn off, and the pain hit me like a physical blow. A sob escaped my throat, raw and ragged. I leaned my forehead against the cold steering wheel and cried. I cried for the little girl with the honor roll certificate. I cried for the teenager who took the blame for a car crash that wasn't her fault. I cried for the woman who had just spent nearly $4,000 to be publicly humiliated by the people she had spent her entire life trying to love. The tears weren't just for tonight. They were for everything. For every forgotten birthday, every dismissed achievement. Every time I had made myself smaller, so Megan could shine brighter. The dinner hadn't broken me. It had shattered an illusion I had been clinging to for 31 years. The illusion that if I just tried hard enough, if I was good enough, successful enough, generous enough, they would finally love me. Sitting there in my car, in my expensive dress, with the city lights blurring through my tears, I realized the truth. It was never about me. It was about them. Their inability to love me had nothing to do with my worth, and I could not spend one more day of my life or one more dollar of my money trying to buy something that was never for sale. The crying stopped. The pain was still there, but it was changing. It was hardening, turning from a deep, aching wound into a cold, sharp anger. They had drawn a line. They had put me on one side and family on the other. Fine, I would accept their terms. But they had no idea what it meant to have me as an enemy. They thought I was the quiet, easy one. They had forgotten that my entire career was built on strategy, data, and finding my opponent's weakest point. And I was about to turn all of my skills on them. The dinner had broken me open. But from that break, something new and dangerous was beginning to grow. I woke up the next morning before my alarm. The sun was just beginning to cast a pale, gray light into my apartment. My eyes were swollen from crying and my head ached, but my mind was perfectly, frighteningly clear. There were no more tears. The sadness from the night before had burned away, leaving behind a cold, hard resolve. I didn't want an apology. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice. I made a pot of coffee, the bitter aroma filling my quiet kitchen. I sat at my dining table, which was covered in files from work, and opened my laptop. For 9 years in marketing, my job had been to understand systems and identify patterns. I analyzed consumer behavior, market trends, and competitor strategies. I knew how to dig. I knew how to take a mountain of chaotic information and find the one thread that, when pulled, would unravel everything. My family, I realized, was just another system. A broken one, but a system nonetheless. And Tyler was its weakest point. His bragging at dinner echoed in my head. Just another 7-figure deal? The city loves us. It had sounded arrogant at the time, but now it sounded suspicious. Tyler's construction company, Greenbuild Solutions, was relatively small. Landing consistent, lucrative city contracts seemed unlikely unless he had an edge. My research began simply. I started with public records. City council meeting minutes, contract bidding documents, business licenses. It was all online if you knew where to look. I spent hours sifting through dry, bureaucratic files, my coffee growing cold beside me. At first I found nothing. Greenbuild Solutions appeared legitimate. They bid on contracts and they won them. But then I started looking at the project details. A pattern began to emerge. Every single city project Tyler's company handled was plagued by unforeseen delays and material cost overruns. A simple park renovation that was supposed to take 3 months took 9. Its budget doubling. A road repaving project was delayed by a mysterious supply chain issue, and the city had to approve an emergency fund allocation to get it finished. To an outsider, it looked like bad luck, but to a data analyst, it looked like a strategy. I cross-referenced the dates of the budget increase approvals with Tyler's and Megan's social media. A week after the park budget was doubled, Megan posted a photo of a new diamond bracelet, captioning it, "My husband spoils me." 3 days after the road paving fund was approved, Tyler posted a picture of them on a private jet, heading to Aspen for a spontaneous weekend. They weren't just living well, they were living beyond the means of a small construction company owner. This was more than a gut feeling now. This was a hypothesis. Tyler was intentionally underbidding to win the contracts, then manufacturing delays and problems to inflate the budget, billing the city for work that was never done, or materials that were never purchased. It was a classic fraud scheme, but I needed proof. I used a portion of my new salary to subscribe to several professional databases that gave me access to deeper financial records, things like corporate filings, property records, and liens. I spent every evening that week glued to my screen, my apartment turning into a war room. I mapped out every company Tyler was associated with on a large whiteboard. That's when I found it. A shell corporation registered in Delaware called MGT Consulting. It had no website, no employees, and no physical address. Its only purpose was to receive payments. I traced the payments going into MGT Consulting and found their source. They were coming from Greenbuild's primary suppliers. These were kickbacks. Tyler was overpaying his suppliers with city money, and the suppliers were funneling a portion of that money back to him through this fake consulting firm. My heart was hammering in my chest. This was it. This was the proof. But as I looked at the name of the consulting firm again, a cold dread washed over me. MGT Consulting. MGT Megan Green. Tyler. My hands trembled as I did one final search, this time on the incorporation documents for MGT. There it was, in black and white, the sole signatory on the account, the registered agent of the corporation, Megan Carter Green, my sister. I leaned back in my chair, the air leaving my lungs in a rush. This wasn't just Tyler's scam. Megan wasn't just a spoiled wife enjoying the benefits. She was an active participant. Her name was on the documents. She was cashing the checks. Every time she'd belittled my job, my ambition, my careful, honest life, she had been funding her own with stolen money. Taxpayer money. The betrayal was so profound it left me breathless. She hadn't just insulted me at dinner. She had looked down on me from a throne built on lies and theft. The memory of her saying, "This one's for real family," flashed in my mind. Her idea of family was a criminal conspiracy. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline, the city they were robbing. My anger was no longer hot. It was ice cold. It was precise. I had all the evidence I needed to destroy them. I had copies of the false invoices. I had the bank transfer records from the suppliers to MGT Consulting. I had the incorporation papers with Megan's name plastered all over them. I could go to the police. I could call a reporter. But that felt too simple, too clean. They had humiliated me publicly, in a place that was supposed to represent my success. They had made a spectacle of my pain. So I would not end them with a quiet phone call. I would end them in the same way they had tried to end me. In the spotlight. At a table for four. Information is leverage. And leverage, I had learned in the boardroom, is power. I now held all the power. And I was going to set a trap so perfect, so elegant, that they would walk right into it, smiling, until the jaws snapped shut. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of silence. I didn't call them. They didn't call me. In their minds, I was probably sulking, nursing my wounded feelings. They would assume that eventually I would come crawling back. I always had. That arrogance was the cornerstone of my plan. During those 3 weeks, I worked. I spent my days being the new senior director, impressing my boss and earning the respect of my team. But at night, I became a strategist. I organized the evidence I had found into a neat, undeniable portfolio. I printed copies of the falsified invoices, the offshore bank statements for MGT Consulting, and the incorporation documents with Megan's signature circled in red ink. I put it all into a crisp manila envelope. Then I did one more thing. I created an anonymous, encrypted email account. From that account, I drafted a whistleblower report to the state's Financial Crimes Division. I detailed the entire scheme, attaching a few key documents as proof, but I held the most damning evidence back. I wrote that more information would be forthcoming. I scheduled the email to be sent at exactly 8:30 p.m. on the night of the dinner. The hardest part was making the phone call. I needed to sound like the old Ella, apologetic, eager to please, a little pathetic. I practiced in the mirror until my voice sounded just right, a perfect blend of regret and hope. I called my mother first. "Mom," I said, my voice quiet. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. I think I overreacted the other night. I was stressed from the new job, and I was too sensitive." "I'm sorry." I could hear the relief in her voice. "Oh, Ella, I'm so glad you called. We were so worried. Of course we forgive you. They were worried I'd stop paying for things, I thought." "I'd like to make it up to everyone," I continued, the words tasting like poison. "I want to take you all to dinner again. My treat. Same place, Larsh. Let's just start over. It worked perfectly." My mother was overjoyed. She said it was a mature and wonderful idea. She would tell Megan and Tyler. There was no suspicion, no hesitation. Why would there be? I was just falling back into my designated role, the family peacemaker, the one who always smoothed things over. When we arrived at the restaurant a few nights later, the scene was eerily similar to the last time, but the atmosphere was entirely different. Megan was glowing, smug with victory. She thought she had won. She was wearing a new dress that probably cost more than my rent and was bragging about the brand new SUV Tyler had just bought her. "It's a beautiful car," I said, my smile feeling like a mask. "You must be doing very well." Tyler clapped his hand on my shoulder. "The best, Ella, the best. Business is booming." He ordered the most expensive bottle of champagne on the menu without even looking at the price. My parents smiled, sipping their water, just happy that the family drama was over and someone else was paying. I played my part. I asked about the SUV. I complimented Megan's dress. I listened to Tyler boast about his unstoppable success. I let them believe they had me right where they wanted me. All through the appetizers and the main course, I was a perfect picture of forgiveness. I was calm. I was pleasant. And inside, my heart beat with the steady, rhythmic calm of a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The waiter, Charles, recognized me. He was more reserved this time, his eyes holding a question. I gave him a small, reassuring nod. When I had made the reservation, I had spoken to him personally. I had told him there was a special surprise delivery for my brother-in-law and had tipped him $200 in advance to ensure his cooperation. As dessert was served, I checked my watch. 8:31 p.m. The email had been sent. Somewhere in an office downtown, an investigator was reading my report. I gave Charles a subtle nod. He walked over to our table holding the manila envelope. "A delivery for you, sir," he said, placing the envelope in front of Tyler. Tyler frowned, a flicker of confusion on his face. "A delivery? For me? Here?" He laughed. "Must be from an admirer." He tore it open casually. As he pulled out the first sheet of paper, a copy of an inflated invoice for his park renovation project, his smile vanished. His face drained of all color. He frantically shuffled through the papers, his hands starting to shake. He saw the bank transfers. He saw the name MGT Consulting. Megan snatched the papers from his hand. "What is this? What's wrong?" Her eyes flew across the pages and her breath hitched. Her face, which had been so smug just moments before, twisted into a mask of pure panic and disbelief. "What is this, Ella?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I leaned back in my chair, took a calm sip of my champagne, and smiled. It was a real smile this time, just a little audit. I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the silent table. You know, since I'm such a data person. Tyler slammed the papers down on the table. You, he snarled, his face a blotchy red. You did this! But it was too late. Across the restaurant, the main doors opened. Two men in plain dark suits walked in. They moved with a calm authority that made everyone in the room stop and stare. They conferred briefly with the maitre d', who pointed toward our table. They walked over, their footsteps silent on the thick carpet. They didn't look at any of us except Tyler. Mr. Tyler Green? One of them asked, his voice polite but firm. Tyler's jaw worked, but no sound came out. We're with the Financial Crimes Division, the man continued, holding up a badge. We need to speak with you. Megan let out a small, strangled gasp. She turned to me, her eyes wide with terror and hatred. Ella, what did you do? I looked at her, at the sister who had discarded me, at the woman who had built her life on theft while judging mine. I felt nothing but a vast, empty peace. I just paid another bill, I said quietly. The one you opened when you decided I wasn't family. And as they escorted a pale, stuttering Tyler out of the restaurant, leaving my sister sobbing at the table and my parents frozen in shock, I knew this was a debt they would be paying for the rest of their lives. The aftermath was not a loud explosion, but a slow, grinding collapse. Tyler's arrest at a place like L'Arche was too juicy for the local media to ignore. The story broke the next day. A photo of a stunned, handcuffed Tyler being led out of the restaurant was on the front page of the Denver Post's website. His face, usually so smug and confident, was pale and slack-jawed. The headline read, Local developer arrested in city contract fraud scheme. The world I had built my career in, the world of marketing and public relations, was now being weaponized against the people who had hurt me. I watched it all unfold from the quiet of my apartment, a detached observer. The story had legs. Every few days, a new damaging detail would emerge. The Shell Corporation, MGT Consulting, was mentioned. The article noted it was registered to Tyler's wife, Megan. Suddenly, my sister wasn't just the wife of an accused criminal. She was a person of interest. Their social circle, built on the illusion of wealth and success, evaporated overnight. Friends stopped returning their calls. Invitations were rescinded. The country club membership was revoked. Megan, who had built her entire identity on being popular and admired, was now a pariah. I saw her once from a distance. I was leaving my office and she was coming out of a discount grocery store down the street. She looked thin and worn. Her glowing blonde hair was dull, pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was driving a beat-up old sedan, not the new luxury SUV she had been so proud of. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second across the busy street. I saw a flash of hatred in her gaze, but underneath it there was something else. Raw, desperate fear. I felt nothing. I simply got in my car and drove home. The legal process was brutal. With the evidence I had provided, the prosecution had an airtight case. The city's auditors descended on Greenbuild Solutions, and what they found was even worse than I had uncovered. Years of systemic fraud, tax evasion, and racketeering. The company was forced into bankruptcy. Their assets were frozen. The beautiful house Megan loved so much, the one with the walk-in closets and the perfectly landscaped garden, went on the market. A foreclosure sign pounded into the pristine lawn. About 2 months after the arrest, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but I knew who it was. I let it go to voicemail. The message, when I listened to it later, was from my mother. Her voice was strained, stripped of its usual polite cheerfulness. She sounded old and frail. Ella, she began, we need to talk to you. It's about Megan and Tyler, the lawyers. The fees are astronomical. We've used all of our savings. Your father and I, we may have to sell the house. Her voice broke. We need your help. You're doing so well now. Your family. Please call me back. I deleted the message. They called again the next day. And the day after, I ignored them all. Finally, on a Sunday afternoon, I decided to answer. I was tired of the ringing. I needed it to stop. Hello? I said, my voice neutral. Ella, thank God, my mother cried, a wave of relief washing through her voice. I was so worried. We need to see you. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about, I said calmly. Don't say that, she pleaded. This is your sister we're talking about. She could go to jail. They're treating her like a criminal. She made a mistake, that's all. Tyler misled her. She signed the papers, Mom, I said, my voice like ice. Her name was on the bank account. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. But she's your family, she insisted, her voice rising in frustration. Family helps family no matter what. You have the money. We know you do. The lawyer said that with a good defense, Megan might just get probation, but it will cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. We can't do it alone. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Family helps family. Where was that sentiment when Megan was crashing a car and I was paying the price? Where was it when I was working 2 jobs in college to make ends meet while they paid for Megan's spring break trip to Cancun? Where was it when they sat in silence as my own sister told me I wasn't welcome at their table? "You're right," I said, and for a moment I could hear the hope surge back into her voice. "You'll help us?" she asked, her voice trembling. "No," I said. "I said you're right. Family helps family. And for the first time in my life, I am finally helping myself. I am protecting myself from all of you." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could hear my father's muffled voice in the background, asking what I had said. "How can you be so cold?" my mother finally whispered, her voice filled with a venomous disbelief. "After everything we've done for you, we gave you a home. We raised you. You gave me a roof over my head," I corrected her. "A home is something different. A home is a place where you feel safe, where you feel loved. I never had that with you." I didn't wait for her to respond. I didn't want to hear the excuses or the accusations. I had said everything I needed to say. "Goodbye, Catherine," I said, using her first name for the first and only time in my life. Then I hung up. I blocked her number. I blocked my father's number. I blocked Megan's. I severed the connection. The fall was complete, not just theirs. Mine too, a fall away from the person I used to be, the girl who would do anything for a scrap of their affection. That girl was gone for good. A month later, on a cool Tuesday evening, I found myself driving downtown with no particular destination in mind. The work week had been demanding, filled with strategy meetings and campaign launches, but it was a good kind of tired. It was the satisfying exhaustion that comes from building something, not from constantly trying to hold yourself together. As I stopped at a red light, I looked up and saw the glittering tower that housed L'Arche. I didn't feel a pang of anxiety or a rush of bad memories. Instead, I felt a strange, quiet curiosity. The place that had been the stage for my greatest humiliation now just looked like a building. A symbol has only the power you give it, and I was ready to take its power away. On impulse, I pulled into the parking garage. I took the glass elevator up to the 54th floor, the same ride I had taken twice before. The first time I was filled with nervous hope, the second with cold determination. This time I felt only a calm sense of purpose. The maitre d' greeted me at the entrance. He was a different man from the one who had been on duty during the night of the arrest, but he still had the same air of professional polish. "Good evening," he said. "Table for one?" "Yes, please," I replied. As he led me into the main dining room, a familiar figure caught my eye. It was Charles, the waiter from those 2 nights. He was setting a nearby table, but he looked up as I passed. His eyes widened slightly in recognition. The maitre d' was about to seat me at a small table by the window when I stopped him. "Actually," I said, my voice clear and steady, "would it be possible to have that table instead?" I pointed to the large round table in the private room where my family had sat. Where I had sat, the maitre d' hesitated. "Madame, that table is for 6. "I know," I said, "but the restaurant doesn't seem too busy tonight." "I'd be very grateful." Before he could protest further, Charles stepped forward. "It's no problem at all, Jean-Pierre," he said to the maitre d'. "I will take care of Miss Carter personally." He turned to me and gave me a small, respectful smile. "This way, miss." He led me to the table, the one that had once felt so large and hostile. He pulled out a single chair for me, the one facing the best view of the city skyline. As I sat down, I looked at the 5 empty chairs around me. They weren't ghosts. They were just empty chairs. "It's good to see you again, Miss Carter," Charles said quietly as he placed a menu in front of me. "It's good to see you too." "Charles," I replied. He looked at me for a moment, a deep, knowing kindness in his eyes. "Much quieter tonight," he said softly. A genuine smile touched my lips. "Yes, it is. I didn't need to look at the menu. I'll have a glass of your best Pinot Noir," I said, "and the grilled salmon." It was what I had wanted to order on that first night. Before Megan had insisted we all share a series of overly complicated and expensive dishes. As I waited for my meal, I looked out at the view. The city lights were just as beautiful as I remembered, but they no longer made me feel small or insignificant. They were just lights. A beautiful, sprawling tapestry of human life, and I was a part of it. I belonged to this city, to myself, in a way I had never belonged to my family. The meal was perfect. The wine was smooth, and the salmon was cooked exactly how I liked it. I ate slowly, savoring each bite. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't read a book. I simply sat there, alone with my thoughts. And for the first time in my life, I felt that it was enough. Being alone wasn't a punishment. It was a luxury. It was peace. The silence was a comfort. There was no one to impress, no one to please. There were no barbed comments disguised as jokes, no heavy sighs of disappointment. There was only the gentle clink of silverware, the low hum of conversation from the rest of the restaurant, and the vast, beautiful city stretching out before me. When I was finished, Charles brought the bill. He placed it discreetly on the table. I opened the leather folder. The total was $146, a perfectly reasonable price for a delicious meal and a million-dollar view. It felt good to pay a bill that was just for me. A bill that came with no strings attached, no emotional debt. I added a generous tip for Charles. "Thank you for everything," I said as he returned with my card. "It was my pleasure, Miss Carter," he said. "Please come back again soon." "I will," I said, and I knew that I meant it. I walked out of L'Arche feeling lighter than I had in years. The restaurant was no longer a monument to my pain. It was just a place with good food and a great view. I had faced the memory and replaced it with a new one. A quiet, peaceful, solitary dinner. A celebration not of a promotion, but of my own liberation. That night, I didn't avenge myself. I reclaimed myself. I had walked back into the heart of my trauma and had built a small sanctuary of peace right in the middle of it. The empty chairs were no longer a symbol of who had left me. They were a symbol of the space I had made for myself. A year can change everything. 12 months after I walked out of L'Arche for the third and final time, my life was unrecognizable in the best possible way. The quiet I had found that night had expanded, filling up the spaces that used to be occupied by anxiety and a desperate need for approval. My work at the firm continued to thrive. I led my team through a massively successful national campaign, earning not only a significant bonus, but more importantly, the deep and genuine respect of my colleagues. The true change, however, wasn't in my career or my bank account. It was in the foundation of my life. I had spent so long trying to force my way into a family that didn't want me, it had never occurred to me that I could build my own. My chosen family grew slowly, organically. It started with Sarah, a woman from my team at work. After a long Tuesday, she invited me out for a drink. We talked for hours, not just about work, but about our lives, our hopes, our frustrations. She listened with an intensity and empathy I had never experienced before. Soon our after-work drinks became a weekly ritual. Then came Mark, a friend from my college days who had moved back to Denver. We reconnected over coffee, and his easy laughter and unwavering loyalty reminded me what true friendship felt like. My family grew to include my neighbor, a kind older woman named Mrs. Gable, who brought me homemade soup when I had the flu, and even my boss, Ms. Albright, who became a mentor and a friend, someone I could turn to for advice without fear of judgment. These were people who showed up. They celebrated my successes without jealousy. They supported me through small setbacks without making me feel like a burden. Love, I learned, wasn't transactional. It was a quiet, steady presence. It was a text message asking if I got home okay. It was a shared bottle of wine on a Friday night. It was the simple, profound comfort of knowing you were seen and valued for exactly who you were. I decided to host Thanksgiving at my apartment. The thought of the holiday used to fill me with dread, the forced cheerfulness, the passive-aggressive comments from Megan, the palpable tension around the dinner table. This year, I wanted to create a new memory. My apartment was filled with warmth and the smell of roasting turkey. Sarah was in the kitchen with me, helping me mash potatoes and laughing about a terrible date she'd been on. Mark was in charge of the music, and Mrs. Gable was telling stories about her childhood to Ms. Albright, who was listening with a warm smile. There were 10 of us in total, a patchwork quilt of people who had found their way into my life. As we all sat down at the table, a table I had bought specifically for the occasion, I felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it almost brought me to tears. This was a family. This was a home. Everyone was talking, laughing, passing dishes. The conversation was real and easy. No one was performing. No one was keeping score. After the meal, as we were drinking coffee, the buzzer to my apartment rang. I frowned, not expecting anyone else. I went to the intercom. "Hello?" A hesitant, gravelly voice came through the speaker. "Ella, it's your father." My blood ran cold. I hadn't heard his voice in over a year. I stood frozen, my hand hovering over the button. Behind me, the laughter in the apartment died down as my friends noticed my stillness. Sarah came and stood beside me, a look of concern on her face. "What should I do?" I whispered to her. She didn't tell me what to do. She just put a supportive hand on my shoulder and said, "Whatever you feel is right." I took a deep breath. I thought about the scared little girl who would have done anything to hear her father's voice. I thought about the woman I was now. I pressed the button again. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. "Your mother and we're not doing well, Ella," he said, his voice thick with a self-pity that I now recognized so clearly. We lost the house. We're living in a small rental. Megan, she's working as a waitress. She lost her kids in the divorce. Tyler gets out in 3 years. He paused, as if waiting for me to express sympathy. I said nothing. We miss you, he finally said, the words sounding hollow and rehearsed. It's Thanksgiving. We thought maybe we could see you, just for a little while. I looked back at the warm, light-filled room behind me, at the faces of the people who truly cared for me. I looked at the table where we had just shared a meal filled with genuine affection. Then I thought about the cold, empty space they were offering me. There's nothing for you here, David, I said. My voice was not angry. It was not bitter. It was just final. I let go of the button without waiting for a reply. I walked back to my friends who were watching me with quiet support. Mark handed me a fresh cup of coffee. You okay? He asked softly. I looked around at their faces, at the new foundation I had built for my life, brick by brick. A foundation built on respect, kindness, and reciprocal love. I'm better than okay, I said, a true, deep smile spreading across my face. I'm home. That night, I learned the final lesson. Walking away from the people who hurt you isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning. It's the chance to clear the ground and build something better in its place. You don't just leave a table. You build a new one and fill it with people who deserve a seat. For most of my life, I thought family was an obligation. It was a debt you were born into, one you had to keep paying back, no matter how high the interest. It was about showing up, keeping quiet, and absorbing the pain because that's what loyalty meant. I believed that love was something you had to earn, and I spent 3 decades trying to qualify for a loan that was never going to be approved. The cost of that belief was immense. It cost me my self-esteem, my peace of mind, and thousands of dollars in both hidden and explicit ways, from paying insurance deductibles to footing the bill for dinners meant to celebrate my own success. I was so busy paying for their comfort that I never stopped to calculate the cost to myself. The final bill at L'Arche, the one for $300-400, was not the most expensive one I ever paid. It was just the last. It was the payment that finally closed the account. What happened to them is not a source of joy for me, but it is a source of closure. Tyler served 4 years of his 7-year sentence and was released on probation. He is a convicted felon, barred from ever working in public contracts again. He works for a different construction company now, doing manual labor. He and Megan divorced while he was in prison. Megan's fall was, in many ways, more complete. She lost everything she had built her identity on: her money, her social standing, her husband, and eventually her children. After the divorce, Tyler's parents sued for and won primary custody of their 2 kids. Megan sees them every other weekend. As my father said, she works as a waitress in a diner off the highway. I don't know if she ever thinks about me. I suspect she only thinks of me as the cause of her ruin, never stopping to consider that she built the house of cards herself. My parents did lose their home. They sold it to pay for their share of the legal fees and to settle some of the debts they had incurred by investing in Tyler's company. They live in a small apartment across town. From what I hear through the grapevine, they are bitter and isolated, 2 people clinging to the wreckage of a life they thought was secure. They blame me for tearing the family apart, refusing to see that it was already broken beyond repair. I was just the one who finally turned on the lights. Do I feel guilty? No. Do I feel pity? Sometimes a faint echo of it. But pity is a luxury you can only afford when you are no longer in danger. And I was in danger with them, not of physical harm, but of a slow, soul-crushing erosion of the self. Staying with them would have cost me my future, my happiness, my peace. And peace, I have learned, is priceless. My new life is not dramatic or extraordinary. It's quiet and it's real. My career continues to be a source of pride and fulfillment. My friendships are my anchor. I am in a relationship now with a good man who treats me with kindness and respect, who celebrates my successes as if they were his own. We are building a life together, a partnership based on trust, not obligation. We are building our own table, day by day. Sometimes the only way to heal is to amputate. You have to be willing to cut off the parts of your life that are poisoning you, even if the world tells you that those parts are supposed to be sacred. Family used to mean loyalty, no matter how much it cost me. Now I know that real family, the kind that sustains you, doesn't come with a price tag. Real family doesn't humiliate you, exploit you, or demand your silence. Real family shows up, lifts you up, and gives you a safe place to land. The most important lesson is this: you cannot control how other people treat you, but you can control whether or not you accept it. You can choose to stop paying the bill. You can choose to get up from the table. And you can choose to walk away and build a life where you are the one who decides who is family. It is the hardest and most important work you will ever do. And the peace you find on the other side is worth every single cost. If you've ever been betrayed by the people who should have protected you, you're not alone. Drop a comment, hit like, and subscribe, because stories like these, they remind us that sometimes walking away isn't cruelty, it's closure.